Okay, wonderful. I'm sure more people would join as the session goes on. So why don't we begin now? Thank you everyone for coming to our latest Kumi Now online gathering. If you're new here and would like to learn more about Kumi Now and Sabil, I'll make sure to put the links in the chat later on, so you can click on that. Today we have the honor of being joined by Randa Signora. So I'll introduce her and then she'll offer her presentation on the gendered impact of Israel's genocide in Gaza and ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. Randa is the General Director of the Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counseling. She is a Palestinian feminist and women's rights defender with professional experience in the field of international human rights and humanitarian law for over 38 years. And in 2018, she was the first Palestinian woman from Palestinian civil society organizations to speak before the United Nations Security Council in her statement at the open debate on women, peace, and security, during which she represented the NGO working group on women, peace, and security. So we have a really renowned expert and activist and feminist with us here today. And so we're very honored to have you with us, Randa. And before Randa speaks, I would like to just remind everyone of the order of the session. So Randa will speak maybe for 30 minutes. We'll have a Q&A with her. And if we have any time left in the session, we'll try to do some nonviolent advocacy together and campaigns. So I'll make sure to provide everyone with some links of some actions that we have in the coming weeks. So Randa, feel free to begin, and thank you so much for joining us and for taking the time to speak with us today.
Good afternoon, good evening to everyone, and maybe good morning to some, I don't know. I'm very happy to speak to you today, and I'm honored to be invited to speak to a wonderful audience. This is not my first time that I speak to Kumi Now, Sabil. But I'm always encouraged to speak, and I hope that I can bring an added value to what we see televised of genocidal acts and ethnic cleansing to which my people are facing since 7 of October 23. We at the Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counseling, it's a Palestinian feminist human rights organization established in 1991 in Jerusalem. With the headquarters in Jerusalem, but then forced to move to Ramallah with the headquarters, maintaining our office in Jerusalem, but moving our headquarters to Ramallah after the 2001 with the building of the annexation wall, which made it very difficult and inaccessible to many of the women to whom we serve. The Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counseling, WCLAC, provides legal aid and services to women victims of gender-based violence and litigate on their behalf in family courts, whether Sharia courts or Christian courts. And we are also an organization that works to influence policies and legislation at the national level and at the international level. Within our work on the international level, we also monitor and document Israeli violations from a gender lens. And this is really the added value of the work of WCLAC, where we are bringing the gendered impact of the Israeli violations and war crimes against Palestinian women and young girls. We usually focus on women over 18, but of course, sometimes when we deal with these things, they are intertwined with the suffering of women. We have learned that always during wars and crises, as was the situation when we had COVID-19, the existing gender inequalities usually deepen and become usually disproportionately impact women because of their traditional roles affecting their lives and also affects those with intersectional vulnerabilities, such as women, heads of households, adolescents, girls, older women, caregivers, and those with disabilities or chronic health conditions. So we have been looking since 7th of October at the situation, since Israel launched its genocidal campaign against the Gaza Strip in October. Over 1.9 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip were displaced, were forcibly displaced. Since then, WCLAC has interviewed over 116 women from Gaza Strip, women who have, despite their unimaginable circumstances, posed their lives and generosity, shared harrowing testimonies of what it means to live through a genocide. We have been really, we want to salute these courageous women who were insisting to give their testimonies and explain to us the traumatic, unprecedented situation under which they're living with the Israeli military aggression and genocidal war on Gaza. They are telling us the stories despite of everything, and the term displacement or forced displacement alone, in our opinion, does not do justice to the brutal realities these women have endured. The average testimony collected by WCLAC from women in the Gaza Strip reveal recurring patterns of unimaginable suffering. I would mention some of them to just give you an idea what is happening. Women sustained injuries. On average, there were 3 times and more, or all often more than once. Women have been forced to flee repeatedly. Some of them have been displaced 7 times, 10 times, 20 times with their families. There is no safe haven in the Gaza Strip. So women were continuously being moving on, finding a safe place for them and for their beloved ones. Women sustaining the injuries and undergoing amputation after amputation. You can imagine moving on, forced to be displaced with being amputated, some of their limbs being amputated, then continuing with their injuries to walk and try to survive and protect the members of the family. Starving due to the complete blockade of humanitarian aid, especially since the beginning of March. We have seen a situation of famine compounded with the deliberate destruction of all Palestinian food production infrastructures. We have seen a complete blockade with starving the people. This is under international law a genocide, intentionally intending to starve a population, collectively punish this population for no reason. These are civilians that should be protected under international law, specifically the Fourth Geneva Convention. We have seen also a severe lack of access to medical supplies and life-saving procedures. We have seen also mothers tend to attend to the injuries of their children, try to find, they are hungry with children, no resources and no rest at all. Ongoing sleep deprivation caused by shrapnel lodged in their bodies, and constant sounds of bombardment and the deliberate use of loud drones to instill fear and prevent rest. We have really documented many incidents of mass casualties and trauma. There are around 22 women being killed every month, every day, and an average of approximately 12,500 women have been killed. 70% of the casualties are among women and children, and the injuries, many of them women have, as I mentioned, living with amputations, trying to, sometimes they didn't have the chance to grieve the loss, and they continue not to be able to grieve the loss of the children, of the spouses, and the extended members of the family. 400 families have completely been annihilated, completely taken away from the registrar, from the civil registrar. They are no more existing. If we come to the issue of forced motherhood in crisis, women must continue to care for the infants and the young children under bombardment, in tents or rubble, often without food, clean water, or sanitary products. This created enormous physical and emotional strain, accompanied with the horror of seeing their newborns born into lifelong effects resulting from the lack of supplies. We have seen women giving birth in very difficult conditions, in tents, in the shelters, some of them going through the C-section without anesthesia, and then many of them losing the opportunity of getting pregnant again because their wombs were extracted, and therefore preventing them from having more chances of giving birth to new more children. In our opinion, this is another genocidal act under the Genocide Convention, which is related to prevention of birth in the group. Women who are, we're talking about around 155,000 women who have been lactating, or 50,000 of them or 55,000 of them were giving birth or pregnant, and therefore that has really meant that over 150,000 women lactating or giving birth to children since the 7th of October have been deprived of that because of starvation and because of the lack of food and the malnutrition of the children and the long-term impact of that on all of them, but specifically on women who have been targeted as mothers, and we have seen also over 19,000 children becoming orphans, losing some of them losing both parents, and some of them losing their mothers. Also, during this situation, we also saw in Gaza working closely with women leadership who are also brave, that continue to work on the ground. They did not travel abroad or did not leave the country. The women leadership in Gaza continue to work with the people at the shelters and to meet the needs and priorities of women in the shelters. They have worked under the most difficult conditions, providing psychosocial support and trying to provide the needed support to women with the absence of hygiene, with even menstruating, without the need, the dignity kits being available, and in trying to manage the situation using the tent cloths sometimes. We have witnessed that happening all the time in the Gaza Strip under the current situation. You all know how it is difficult in overcrowded places to have clean water, hygiene, especially for women who are in the dire need of additional care for hygiene and for dignity kits, which were not available and were lacking. Under these conditions, also, we have seen an increased gender-based violence risks due to the absence of, due to the overcrowdedness and the absence of privacy to those women. And sometimes they have been blackmailed and they have been abused by in one instance, for example, they were told, why do you need to stand in the queue? We can provide you with the needed food, or if you provide other services. So we've been seeing an increase in gender-based violence that is going on. These are the stories of displacement. They are the testimonies of survival under a campaign of systematic annihilation. The women's accounts reveal a reality far more devastating than living in tents or scavenging for food in dumpsters. What they describe in the relentless, calculated form of collective punishment, international torture of an entire population. Weak, emancipated, shrapnel-filled bodies are forced to flee again and again, consumed by fear and despair. With the constant hum of drones overhead, a chilling reminder that Gaza, you can run, but you cannot hide. Also, in the meantime, while all the eyes were on Gaza, we have also seen Israeli settlers have wasted no time to intensify their attacks on towns and villages in the West Bank. State-sanctioned settler terrorism has been actively and systematically used to forcibly displace communities with full impunity and under the protection of Israeli forces. Here is an example of how this operates on the ground. An Israeli settler arrived at in Samia Bedouin community, accusing residents of stealing one of his goats. Without permission, he forced his way into their barns, took photos of their sheep, and left. Shortly after, the Israeli occupation forces arrived and presented the community with two options: either leave the area with their belongings or face mass detention. As a result, Ain Samia Bedouin community was fully displaced in May 2025. As a result of ongoing settler violence, including armed attacks on civilian population, indiscriminate arson, the poisoning of water of the wells, and the killing of the livestock, and accompanied by demolitions and constant intimidation by Israeli forces, more than 24 Bedouin communities have been completely displaced between October 23 and only until August 2024. We have seen also many of the villages being attacked, the settlers being armed, and the women have been always in the forefront because they work on their agricultural land. They are adjacent to the illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank, and therefore they are the most victims. During the olive harvest, women lost their life. There was women in the northern part of the West Bank have lost completely their lives. Similarly, taking advantage for the attention that has been fully directed towards Gaza, the Israeli military has simultaneously intensified its campaigns in the West Bank. Forced violent evacuations, particularly of refugee camps, after the disruption of the work of the UNRWA and the prevention of them to continue with their work in the occupied territory, they started the campaign immediately early this year with targeting Jenin refugee camp, Tul Karam, and Nur Shams in the northern parts of the West Bank. They have displaced over 45,000 Palestinians. Women, as always, carry the heaviest burdens of that, navigating violence and the sole responsibility of protecting their families in the face of collective punishment. In the Jenin refugee camp, 20-year-old Wafa, a mother of two young children, aged 3 and 1, spoke to WCLAC about the trauma she endured. Her husband was left completely paralyzed after being shot by Israeli occupation forces in December 2024. Just 1 month later, in January 2025, Wala was forced to evacuate the camp with her children following an Israeli military incursion. She recounts, "We woke up the sound of loudspeakers warning residents and urging them to evacuate as the occupation army's tanks had reached the entrances of the camp. The sound of exploded bullets hitting the walls echoed every minute. Out of the sheer fear, I held my children tightly and ran. That night, I fled with my children. The streets were packed with hundreds of residents running out of the camp in panic. It was a very cold night, and all I could think about was protecting my own children." The legal implications of what is happening is really extremely dangerous. We are seeing here complete ignorance of international law and international human rights and humanitarian law. We are seeing a lot of indications that perhaps at the beginning, when South Africa applied for the suspecting or allegations of genocidal acts, and the International Court of Justice has taken the position that yes, there is the possibility that there is genocidal act because there is the intent to starve a population. There were Israeli politicians, Israeli officials coming up, like the Minister of Defense or Army, coming up gallant, speaking out, "We want to starve them, we want to annihilate the whole population, we would not provide them with water, with food, and with fuel." And they have really, as we moved further in the military aggression on the Gaza Strip, We have seen that they have intended to starve a whole population, to impose a complete blockade, and at the same time try to force the people into small communities and force them into out of Gaza. This is also being repeated. We hear now in the West Bank the word Gazification, the intent to repeat the experience that people witnessed in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank. People are forced out of their refugee camps, and the refugee camps, with the demolitions of homes and the opening of the roads, have been integrated into the main cities of Jenin, Tulkarem, and so on. And they are moving from the north down to other refugee camps gradually. At the same time, there are Israeli plans for the de jure annexation of the West Bank, especially Area C, which constitute around 62% of the land of the West Bank. They are trying to do that through legal means, to legitimizing, quote unquote, their acts by only on the 11th of May. They have decided that they want to start the process of registration of land and land settlement process, and therefore they will start now to register land in the name of settlers and create facts on the ground, which will make it much more difficult later on to change the situation. These facts on the ground will really mean that they will grab more land, they will grab more resources of the Palestinian people, and they will keep the Palestinian people without any of their resources, and would really they try at one point to end the issue of refugees, of our right to return, and at the same time they trying to force us to either voluntarily leaving the country, or forcing us gradually to move out of certain areas, especially, for example, the Jordan Valley, which is the most fertile land, and trying to start with the plan of annexation, which was started during the first Trump administration, and now it is on the table, but it's being done with a creeping annexation. In a way, they're doing it gradually, in a way that is unnoticeable, or through legitimizing that by the Israeli parliament or Israeli Knesset. We also think that this is unprecedented, that all the infrastructure, medical infrastructure, water and sewage systems in the West Bank, in the refugee camps in the West Bank, but mainly in the Gaza Strip, has been completely disrupted. We are talking about 80% of the buildings being completely destructed or partially destructed, unlivable. The situation is so catastrophic, and the international community is moving, but very slowly, to take measures against these crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide that is taking place, genocidal crimes taking place in the Gaza Strip. We have a lot of demands, and we think that it is important that we take immediate and permanent action, and everybody should do all what they can in order to stop the Israeli military aggression on the Gaza Strip and the bombardment. Every day there are tens, and sometimes it reaches 100 people being killed, civilians. The story of Ala al-Najjar, maybe you've heard of her. She's a doctor. Her husband is also a doctor in the Gaza Strip. What happened is that she lost 9 of her children in the bombardment, with another son in a dangerous situation, and her husband, who has been bombarded. She was lifted by her husband to the hospital to go and take care of, she's a pediatrician, and she takes care of the children, and she was going to her work while the father was attending to his kids, and then the home was bombarded, with losing all her loved ones, her family, all her investment, all her sorrows. Her soul should carry all losses that have taken place. All what she did in her life has been completely lost in front of her eyes. They brought the bodies of her children in front of her eyes to the hospital in Khan Yunis. So this is one example of the suffering of women in the Gaza Strip. So the immediate cessation of military aggression on Gaza, and genocidal war should stop. We have to find a way to urge the international community. It's not enough that the European Union last week took a decision to reconsider the association agreement. This is only starting to think of stopping the association agreement. It's not enough that the UK will stop the negotiations over the free trade agreement. It is without taking real measures to make Israel pay for its crimes and for its violations of international law, we will not go very far. We have to find a full and safe and sustained humanitarian access that should be ensured to prevent further starvation and suffering caused by the Israeli blockade and the destruction of essential infrastructure. We call on the United Nations also to immediately declare Gaza as a famine zone based on of course, a human-made famine zone, verified according to the data and to the support. This unified call be actively facilitating, endorsing, and joining the diplomatic humanitarian convoy. The international community should not stand still when we see a televised genocide taking place in Gaza, ethnic cleansing to a whole population of the Gaza Strip. Immediate and permanent cessation of forced eviction and demolitions and settler terrorism in the West Bank should be stopped. There should be support and potentially joining South Africa in its case against Israel in the International Court of Justice. We have to demand that Israel grant access to the United Nations bodies, particularly special rapporteurs and special procedures on the occupied territory, Francesca Albenza, and to facilitate the UN Commission of Inquiry to investigate work by allowing them to enter into Palestine. We also documented cases of sexual violence, women being used as a tool of war, and many of the kidnapped women in Gaza and in the West Bank, prisoners have given testimonies to WCLAC. We have been before the UN Commission of Inquiry, and we have given them the testimonies of those women. We were in public hearings, which went viral and have been seen by over 10 million or more people. That shows that there is enough evidence that we have collected of them.
And then I'm going to my lunch. Are you there?
I
Oh.
think
She was.
Oh, no worries.
any problem?
I think the mic was just accidentally turned on for someone. So you can finish your presentation unless you want to.
Yeah, I'm finishing.
Okay,
Yes,
yeah, no worries. Yeah, take your time.
Yeah, I think also it is very important that we, on the international, on the 24th of May, it was the International Women in Peace and Disarmament. And I think imposing weapon embargo on Israel, as the Spanish Parliament did, is a very important step in the right direction. Continuous provision of military heavy artillery that is being and prohibited arms that are being traded with Israel and provided with Israel should stop immediately. I think the international community should reaffirm its commitment to the fundamental rights of Palestinians, including the right to security, dignity, and the right to self-determination, to impose sanctions on settlers that incite and take part in the attacks on Palestinians, including Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has weaponized all the settlers. He is the Minister of Security Minister, who is responsible for prisons as well, who have also been responsible for the sexual assault incidents to which many Palestinian prisoners and has been subjected to. We call on the international states, international community, but specifically states, to continue their support to UNRWA and emphasize its crucial role in addressing the ongoing humanitarian catastrophe in the Gaza Strip, to ban settlement products as settlements are a violation of international humanitarian law. Diplomatic and economic measures, including targeted sanctions and boycott, should be considered against individuals and entities responsible for those ongoing violations to deter further abuses and ensure justice. As in one of our webinars that we have conducted before the resumption of the military aggression on Gaza on the 17th of March, we were told by the Gazan testimonies that were given to us in a highly attended webinar, do not ask us how we are. We demand accountability. Accountability is an important component for making justice to the Palestinian people. It is not accepted that this goes, all these crimes and crimes against humanity go with unattended by the international community. Thank you for your attention and for giving me the chance to speak.
Thank you so much, Randa, for your insightful presentation and a lot of the details that you went into. I think it's really helpful for our audience as we continue to try to advocate. Someone asked, in terms of the statistics that you mentioned during your presentation, where we can assess these reports and where we can find them.
Yeah, actually, there are numerous, UN organizations are producing data, and the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics is also providing regular data. The Office of the UN for Humanitarian Aid, OCHA, always gives in updated information about violations in all the occupied Palestinian territory. And there are also regular reports produced by the UN Women, especially the humanitarian, the gender international humanitarian working group, aid humanitarian group, who has regularly provided information on this. The information is available. There is a website that was produced by Palestinians, but the numbers started to be unpredictable. We say that there is this number every day. The numbers are changing, and every life counts, and especially that many are also still under the rubble and their bodies have not been taken out. This recalls one of the incidents that we documented of a woman saying when her 2 kids were under the rubble, she was shouting and saying, "I want to bury my 2 kids. I don't want the dogs to eat their bodies." So you can imagine the suffering and the trauma under which women, so many are disappearing, or we don't know where they are, or they are under the rubble, or they have been or they have been arrested. And I just want to mention that, new problems within the family are emerging. Women do not have documentation. They cannot access the finances of their husbands. Most of the money and the property, if they have anything, is in the hands of their husbands. They cannot really access their rights, and the situation have extremely got difficult. In one of the incidents, which I'm sorry to mention, also because of patriarchal structures, when the families move from one place to the other, they are living with the extended family or moving. Everybody started to interfere in the privacy of women, and if the husbands have been killed or disappeared or kidnapped by the Israeli military, sometimes kidnapped in the real sense of the word, or they don't know, there was bombardment, they don't know if the husband was killed or not. What happens is really that the family forces the women to marry the brother-in-law, because they have to stay in the same place, and they have to ensure understanding that she cannot be in the same place with somebody whom she is not related to directly. And therefore, we see here how patriarchal structures are enforcing also the Israeli practices and making women even more vulnerable in these situations. In one of the incidents, this woman has been married to the brother-in-law because the husband disappeared. And then after the exchange of prisoners with the Israelis, he shows up. when she was already married to his brother. So we can have many additional social problems emerging from as a result of patriarchal structures, but also the Israeli policies that are disproportionately impacting the lives of Palestinian women. So numbers are important, I'm saying, for example, now we say 12,000, around 12,700 women have been killed and almost 19,000 children. So if we calculate them together, we are speaking about 70% are women and girls. Every hour, a woman is being killed. So this is how we reach the number of 21 women, hour and a half, a woman is being killed. So this is the average of course, UNFPA gives information about women in lactating women or women in reproductive rights issues and pregnant women. So we're talking about situations where prenatal, natal, and after giving birth, lactating children are problematic, and every specialized UN agency is addressing a component of the issue. With some of the humanitarian organizations giving the overall picture of the situation.
I wonder also if you could talk about programs and the work that WCLAC does in terms of trying to mitigate some of these effects for women throughout Palestinian society. So yeah, if you could talk a little bit about the organization.
Yes, actually, we had to move immediately after 7th of October into an emergency plan in order to respond to the emerging problems. Now, WCLAC does not work in Gaza directly. We only have field researchers who monitor and document Israeli violations and cases of femicide. So our field researchers, while moving from one location to the other, being forced to be displaced themselves, were continuing with their documentation work, and we had to build very good partnerships with feminist leaders in the Gaza Strip, who continued, as I mentioned, to work on the ground and did not go out of the country to do advocacy abroad, but they were working at the grassroots level. We built partnerships with them. In the West Bank, we were really responding much more quicker. We have responded to the needs of women from Gaza who were stuck in the West Bank on the 7th of October. They are mostly women with chronic diseases who have been referred for medical aid and medical treatment in the West Bank or East Jerusalem, but were not able to return back to their homes, or women who were accompanying children with diseases and were so we have a serious problem of women who are deprived of returning to their families. Some of them opted at the beginning of the Israeli military aggression to return, but it was a very difficult trip where they have been handcuffed and tightened to their chairs for hours, for over 24 hours or more, and transferred only without even having their mobiles or anything with them, and thrown on the borders into Gaza Strip. Most of them, we had to really immediately respond to that need. We also started to work with our community-based organizations at the different locations of the West Bank and the protection networks. We have protection networks in the governance in the West Bank. We have 6 protection networks that are working in the different locations to address issues of gender-based violence. Immediately, we had to respond through working with the partners from those who are from official institutions who provide services for women victims of gender-based violence, but also from from the civil society organizations that are joining our protection networks. So we try to reach out through our volunteers, to our human rights activists, try to provide the necessary services to reach out to the communities, because what Israel did after 7th of October, it was the situation before, but it has been intensified, is closing the every government, or not even every government, the checkpoint system with the electronic gates and with the mobile checkpoints and so on has increased tremendously. Over 950 checkpoints and the electronic gates are closing villages, towns, and cities from each other. So we had to reach out ourselves to them because commuting for our services became much more difficult. Also, WCLAC, because of its UN ECOSOC status and engagement with the United Nations system, has been very active on advocacy work at the international level to highlight from the evidence-based data that we collected Israeli violence and violations. We have been communicating regularly and providing information for the UN Commission of Inquiry, for the ICC, and joining efforts through our advocacy campaigns during the Human Rights Council or the Commission on Status of Women, or whenever we can meet with the special procedures, UN special rapporteurs and working groups. We have continuously conducted our advocacy work. So it is a combination of providing the necessary, responding to the necessary needs. Some of them are humanitarian, although our work is not humanitarian, but in some incidents we had to provide some of the dignity kits, the needs of women, and priorities. What I would like to say is that now, if we come to a situation where this an agreement is being reached with the Israelis and the war on Gaza stops, I think that usually women are delegated back to the caregiving roles. And what we're trying to say is that these women leaders who have been working on the ground and have been close to the needs and priorities of women should be in the forefront of peace building, negotiations, and recovery, reconstruction of Gaza. We don't want them to be excluded from decision making, from meaningful political participation. So much of our work at WCLAC is really to call for the need to ensure that women are not being only, there is tremendous increase in the number around there is increase of around 5% in the number of women who became the main house breadwinners of the family. They became the responsible for their families with around, it's reaching now around 15 to 16%. It was prior to the war around 9 to 10%. So this percentage of women who are widowed, who have lost their husbands and have to maintain their families now, need to be taken into account. We cannot be seen only as victims. This is what we always make as a message. Women are not only victims. They are positive agents for change and active agents for change, and they know best the needs and priorities of the community because they are impacted by the results of the Israeli aggression on our people, and therefore they should be in the decision-making processes and active participants in decision-making processes and recovery after the war.
And you mentioned your relationship with international organizations like the UN. So I'm curious also in terms of attacks on UNRWA and other international institutions in the West Bank, let's say, how has that affected your organization's work on the ground?
Actually, WCLAC, there is now a shrinking space not only for UN agencies. Many of the donor countries with the spread of right-wing governments in Europe specifically, we have been tremendously impacted with the shrinking space for civil society. Many of the donors who have been supporting WCLAC and other organizations froze some of their funding or decided that they want to shift their funding towards humanitarian aid rather than developmental aid. And therefore, we lost many of our core program funders. With regard to the UNRWA specifically, we have not been affected specifically, but we also joined the GIHA, which is the Gender Working Group, humanitarian group in order to have our input in decision making at that level. The working group is part of the different cluster groups working, and it is the gender cluster group on humanitarian aid to international humanitarian aid to Palestinian women. We are always regularly attending the meetings and trying to engage. We mostly work with UN Women and UNFPA, and with the Office of the UNCHR, in monitoring and documenting the cases and trying to find how we access our work. But at the level of the donors community who are supporting us, we have been tremendously impacted. Actually, some organizations, not WCLAC, have been affected if they were covered by the support of US aid funding, but we are not affected. And many of the organizations under the umbrella of the Palestinian NGO network have decided not to take any funds from the US aid. So that damage has been less to some extent on us and on Pingo, because ultimately we have taken the decision as early as the 90s that we do not want to take conditional funding. But having said all of that, definitely there are numerous challenges in finding the resources and ensuring the coverage of our programs under the current situation. And there's real shrinking spaces with the governments reconsidering or shifting their funding to other places.
Thank you, Rhonda. Are there any other questions? If you have questions, please put it in the chat, and I'll make sure to ask Rhonda. In the meantime, I can maybe ask two more questions. The first one is, how can we get involved with your organization, WCLAC? And if there's anything that you have to say, for anyone who wants to get involved with the organization. And then the second question is, if you have any words to say for us most of us in this room are international citizens, we're part of different countries, other than advocating for the end of genocide and the end of blockade, what recommendations do you have for people who want to advocate and speak about gender-based violence in Gaza or other, locations in Palestine?
Yeah, actually, I mean, we are available. We are willing to always speak to delegations, and we have innovated, this idea of advocacy webinars where we speak and we ask for support to the organization. Individual support through crowdfunding is highly appreciated. If anybody is interested to donate anything to the organization and support it. But also, I know that now the World Council of Churches is conducting a huge international campaign from occupation to annexation. And this is a very good opportunity to use all means to engage and to pressure through advocacy work, as you mentioned, in order to influence your own governments, wherever you're present, and try to really make an end. Because I think the popular movement on the ground has given a lot of momentum and turning point at the international level, and brought attention to the rights of the Palestinian people living such a prolonged military occupation. So I think a lot could be done. Everybody knows what is most suitable and how it could be done. What we think is that the gendered impact, it's really an attempt now that we are focusing on, of trying to work more with the women from the the global feminist movement has not been very active on the situation in Palestine. And we have seen that they have not taken a lot of, they have not provided a lot of support for women under colonial occupation and living a genocide. So I think that now we are shifting more to work with to amplify the voices of women and to develop our discourse with the feminist movements in the southern part of the globe. But at the same time, there are allies in Europe and in the Western countries that we should not overlook. And we should think together how we can shift the paradigm, the discourse towards, developing a gender discourse or a feminist discourse that penetrates colonial structures. The understanding that colonial occupation and all forms of colonialism, neocolonialism, neoliberal policies negatively impact women globally, and the understanding of women's rights in individual rights, not collective rights, is a problematic issue. The feminist issue should not be only individual feminist rights, it should be a political issue. Everything that's happening in the world is political, and the feminist work is political, and therefore the feminist movement should really politicize its struggles. Not because we think that it's our cause as Palestinian women, but we think that we see all oppressive structures intertwining and enforcing each other. And therefore, it is very important that we dismantle that and try to reconstruct a different discourse where the sound and the voices of women from the Southern Globe, from Palestine, and from conflict zones, and women in conflict and under occupation are being better heard at the international level. And there is a very big link between women's and political and other oppressive, there's intersectionality not only among the different identities of women, but the intersectionality of the oppressive powers. This is very much enhancing each other, and therefore we should have a different discourse in understanding, analyzing the situation, and building solidarity with the feminist movement more in the Southern Globe than in the Northern Globe, in my opinion.
And how important is language, like the use of language, how we talk about women, for example? Like, do you have any, like, for example, are there any problematic ways that the international community frames women and children or aid? So I wonder if you have any thoughts on how people can frame their language and discourse better.
Well, I always am trying to avoid always linking women with children, because there is even among some of the right-wing governments now, the word gender is not being accepted. Speaking about gender equality, they say they want to speak about women's rights, not gender issues, because this is the conservative right-wing governments. We have to see, some of the terminology that are being used. It is the context, understanding the social, economic, political context, and understanding not only those who are being oppressed, but also the oppressors, will make us really politicize feminist issues. Some in our region, for example, they don't like to use the word feminist. They only want to speak about women-led organizations and about women, but they don't want us to say we are feminists. But we can give a different definition to feminism. So the conceptual framework is not the problem. It is understanding the oppressive structures that are negatively impacting the lives of women, especially in our society or in our specific situation, colonial occupation and patriarchal structures.
Thank you so much, Randa. And I see that someone has already linked your website in the chat, so we'll make sure that everyone has a chance to visit Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counseling. And hopefully, CB has international delegations, so we hope that we'll continue to meet with you in the future. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for taking the time.
It was my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me again.
Thank you. So we have a few minutes left, so we'll let Randa go, as it's probably evening time in Palestine. And we'll spend the rest of the time. First of all, I encourage again to visit the website and donate if you can, to support WCLAC's work. And then, if anyone else has,
please, if you want to donate, please let me know that, because we have an organization in the United States where
wonderful.
We can do it through them. We are trying to have it directly to WCLAC, but now we are doing it via another organization.
Do you have any information that you can put in the chat, or maybe your email?
I will send it to you.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll do that. So we'll make sure. Yeah, thank you, Randa.
Okay.
So yeah, if anyone wants to donate, I'll make sure to update everyone next week once Rhonda sends me the information. As she said that there is kind of like Friends of Sibiu North America, there's probably a similar organization for a WCLAC that does that type of work. So in the meantime, if you have any actions or campaigns, feel free to share it in the chat or raise your hand. I have one campaign that I would like to share that I'll put the link to. So this is a recent call from Palestinian Christian women. Sabila is one of the main signatories, calling for an end to the blockade of Gaza and for international involvement. So let me just put that in the chat for everyone. And they're inviting everyone to sign. It's a public letter, so uh, you can sign this if you're able, and you can put your name on this letter. And so that will help kind of support the call and amplify the call a bit. So I will just put this. So give me a second, and I can link it in the chat.
So signing on, and you do not have to be a woman to do so?
Yeah. Thanks, Randy, for the clarification. So I'll send it. You can read the text. I think that will give you some clarity on what it is. It's a woman's voice for Gaza, a call for justice and life. And they're inviting, I think they have about 900 or 700 signatures right now. So we really encourage everyone to sign and also share it with your community so that we can have as many people as possible signing it. The other immediate action, which started last week, last Thursday, but it's continuing for 40 days. So I encourage everyone to get involved. But Veterans for Peace is organizing a 40-day fast for Gaza. So this began last Thursday, and people across the country as well as around the world will join in a fast to demand the full resumption of humanitarian aid to Gaza and an immediate end to U.S. military support for Israel. And there's different fasting levels that you can do, but one of the asks during the fast is that while you're fasting, you remember to advocate for Gaza and kind of have that time that instead of eating or instead of having meals, that you spend that time supporting and amplifying campaigns. So they're doing this, and you can join. I think New York and DC have centers or organized groups around this, but if you're in a more rural community, for example, you can still do this and take part.